Some people take the straight path in life. But at Arizona State University, we respect your twists and turns. They make our online students more driven to excel in their professional lives. That's why our personalized suite of services empowers you with innovative resources and staff that sticks with you. Make your next turn with one of our 300-plus programs at ASU, #1 in innovation for 9 consecutive years. Visit us at asuonline.asu.edu to learn more.
Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NAEP preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.
So look, anybody who looks at my Instagram feed will know that I pretty much spend most of my time on ferries on Sydney Harbour.
That's all the pics.
That's all the pics, include other than the pudding pictures. Anyway, one day I was on the ferry with my then teenage son. We were both coming home from his high school in the city, and lo and behold, but who gets on board the ferry but Malcolm Turnbull?
Oh, wow.
Prime Minister at the time, Malcolm
Shocking.
Turnbull. So he lives just around the corner from Rose Bay Ferry Wharf, so he was catching the ferry home. Now, I'm standing there with my son, wearing his school blazer with his braids for all of his work in drama, and I just sort of turned around to him at one point and went, "All right, mate, that's the Prime Minister." And he went, "Yeah." And I went, "Spot his protection detail." And he went, "Oh, there's one there, and that's probably one there, and he could be one." And then I went, "All right, now, considering they're the ones you spotted, how would you get to him?" And we heard a voice behind us going, "We're right here, mate, shut up."
No way.
Yeah, it was one of the protective guys. And I just like, mate, just a thought exercise for my son as to spotting these guys. And then one guy literally stood up right in front of the Prime Minister and went, "You've got to get through me, and you didn't pick me to start with." He had what would be classically known as a 5-man PPE.
Okay.
So, or PET, protective, these guys were there to make sure he was safe. So I thought, considering that there are so many pilled idiots at the moment screaming about, we've got to kill all these politicians, maybe we should talk about how we protect our politicians.
Let's do it. You're listening to I Spy, the personal protection detail of Australian intelligence.
Shots fired! Coming from the left! Everyone run! Oh, sorry, Prime Minister, you come with us.
Oh, where's my shoe? I lost my shoe. Hello and welcome to I Spied. My name's Michelle Stevenson. I'm here with David Callan, and we're going to talk about how we protect our politicians. And this came up recently because the Australian Federal Police had to step in. They've been forced to mobilise against some specific threats that were made to politicians over the weekend. Now, this is also off the back of, a British MP being murdered recently as well. So, everyone's kind of being hyper vigilant around politicians, and especially with the mobilisation of people who are blaming politicians for the current state of the world.
Now, the interesting thing, and you mentioned the British politician, not every politician gets personal protection.
Yeah, that's interesting, right?
It's very simple. Personal protection is really expensive because it's very man-intensive and man-hour intensive, right? So, Malcolm Turnbull on the ferry, he's the Prime Minister. He is literally walking amongst the people. That is a specific threat. They have to protect him. And he walked home from the ferry. He walked around Rose Bay to Darling Point or wherever it is he lives.
Because he's the man of the people.
Because he's a man of the people. You drive around Wentworth and you'd see him and Lucy going for a walk every day.
To their mansion, because they're of the people.
Of the people. For the people, of the people, living in a freaking big house. All right? So, look, the thing is we look after our VIPs, but just because you're a parliamentarian doesn't make you a VIP.
Yeah.
Now, what's going on at the moment, this is causing a lot of headaches for, say, the AFP. Interestingly enough, on Twitter, after all of these threats started coming out against Dan Andrews and McGowan and Palaszczuk, when these people started making threats on their lives, the first thing you saw in the Twitter sphere is, why aren't the police in Asia doing anything about this? Oh, my God, they're so hopeless. They're not arresting these people. Well, funnily enough, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, arrests started being made.
Yep.
Why? Because ASIO and the police were paying attention. They just don't go, well, let's arrest everyone. They work out where the threat really comes from and they take that threat out. via arrest using the law.
Yep.
So, right, the great example is Imre Peleva. He tweeted, he didn't tweet, he sent it out as a text on what is regarded as a social media platform. Someone needs to shoot Mr. Dan Fuck in the head with a 50 cal explosive tip just to make sure he's gone for life. Are we allowed to take firearms to the protest? Okay.
It's crazy.
Well, that's just a threat, okay? The guy's made a stupid thing online. The other problem he had, and this is what they picked him up for, it wasn't him going, can we take guns? Which is just like, no, don't be a dickhead. The thing that was really important was he was also inciting people to make explosive. He was teaching people how to make Molotov cocktails online. Like it's that hard to make a Molotov cocktail. So that's what got him pinged. And another one was Kenneth Pantev, who's a renowned neo-Nazi in Melbourne. He was busted for sharing instructions of how to 3D print an automatic rifle online. So these guys are making plausible threats. Now, the AFP and ASIO would have looked at that and gone, no, we got to stop these guys right now. Now, on the flip of it, you've got someone like Kate Callan, no relation, I swear to God. I've looked at the photos and gone, no, you're not a member of my family. Now, she's from Reignite Democracy. She's walking around with photographs of nooses going, this one's for you, Dan Andrews.
Yeah.
That's not a really palpable threat, right? So, interestingly enough, it probably irritates her no end that ASIO and the AFP would have gone, yeah, no, you're a twit. Whereas the real threats do get addressed.
Yeah, so what I was going to say, like, it's just interesting because, like, threats against politicians aren't new, but it does seem to be something that has kind of been exacerbated by the current climate. Like, more people are more vocal about what they want to do to politicians, and they're not afraid of repercussions, which is what I am finding quite unusual to get my head around.
And that's a really important point. It's like COVID has literally metastasized this frustration with politicians, and now people are a lot more willing to express their violent desire to change the regime, which again leads to a lot of threats. Now, that means we have to protect the politicians. I mean, somebody releasing, Malcolm Roberts releasing Jackie Lambie's telephone number on the floor of the Senate.
Not great.
She was, now, interestingly enough, someone said, but she put it on her Facebook page. Well, yeah, you've got to put your phone number on a Facebook page, I think, for validation. That doesn't mean she wants people to call it, and it gets buried. You've got to look for it.
Yeah, you don't need the opposition or someone who opposes you to weaponize that, which is essentially what they've done. And that makes people feel very unsafe. And we also have with the WA Premier, he's had threats to him and his family. Which
his address has been released?
Yes, and he's even talking about moving because of it.
And the same thing with Dan Andrews. I mean, Dan Andrews did the right thing. He just stood up and went, okay, guys, you can do this. I'm not going to stop doing my job. But you can be assured that there will be at least a copper, there will be a constable sitting in a car outside those houses now. Right now, that is the very, very basic protection that you'll get. You'll have a copper sitting outside a house.
Yep.
But if you're talking about people like the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, God knows he doesn't need protecting because he scares the hell out of me. He's nuts. But the US President's a great example. They have, it's VIP protection work, it's called. Now in Australia, it's the AFP.
Yep.
And then, of course, it breaks down into the states. So in Victoria, they have the Protective Services. Now, they look after things like government buildings and schools. And, they're the guys that are sitting at the desk in front of the government building. I mean, they weren't the same guys that we had at ASIO. That's a completely different story. I've got a great story about the guards at ASIO.
Yep.
But the whole thing is a VIP protection organisation or group is there to mitigate the risk to the security and the dignity of the principal. Now, the principal is the person you're protecting. So essentially, you're there to preserve that guy's life and to make sure he's not embarrassed. Now, that may sound kind of like, really, is it that important? But it is. There's a really interesting video, and I'll post it online, of Vladimir Putin with his protective detail. And it's a great example of how a protective detail swings into action. He's at Volkswagen in Germany. He's standing there with Angela Merkel. And the next thing, two girls without their tops on and "you're a rapist and a murderer" written all over their bodies, run across the floor and screaming and waving their arms. Immediately, these guys get between Putin and these women. Now, what was really interesting is Putin's literally standing there watching them run up going, come on, bring it, baby. It sounds great.
Yeah.
But he was literally pushed out of the way. And one of the interesting things when you interviews with Putin's protection detail, they love him. They think they say of all the people they've ever protected, he's the easiest because he's ex-security. So whenever something goes wrong,
so he knows what he's doing.
He does what they tell him.
Yeah.
He doesn't turn around and go, no, I know what I'm doing. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like if they go, get under that car and stay there, he gets under the car and stays there, right? He doesn't muck around. So this is the thing, and it works in 3 phases. You've got close protection, then you've got mobile and static. Now, close protection is obviously you've got guys on your body as you're walking. And it's a very simple technique to work. You have one person, he's the PPO, the personal protection officer.
Right.
He will generally stand behind your right shoulder, literally within a foot of you as you walk along. They don't stand in front of you because you want to be open to the people. And then you'll have 4 guys called the PET or the personal escort team that stand at the corners of a box around you. So you're nice and open. Now, there are ways of changing that. You can turn it into a diamond shape, though they don't like doing a diamond because it's aggressive. And then, of course, you've got what's known as the V, where you've got an inverted V where you've got 3 guys in front, 3 guys behind.
Right.
And one of those guys is your personal protection officer, right? So these guys protect you, and their job is to get you out of there if something goes wrong. So when you watch Olympus Has Fallen or any of those great films with that incredibly action star, I can't remember his name.
Gerard Butler.
That's the one. Of course, you'd remember Gerard Butler because...
Well, I mean, what's there not to remember?
What's there not to like, I suppose. Now, the thing is, he's always like, I'm going to go and stop these guys and shut it all down. That is not his job. A personal protection officer is not there to stop... They're there to stop the threat. Protect the guy and get the principal out of there. That is his number one job. They're not there to investigate what's going on. They're not there to take the threat down and keep fighting until the threat's gone. They're there to remove the principal from the threat. That's all they have to do. Now, interestingly enough, when a VIP travels overseas, so say Scott Morrison travels overseas, he will take his own personal protection with him.
Yeah, and well, that makes sense.
Of course, because they know him and they know how he moves and what he likes. But beyond that little inner circle, that inner core of protective officers, there will be the external protection, which will be the nation state, the host state will be looking after that. It's their job to take out the threat. Now, of course, there can come to a point where it's just us and them. Yeah, well, if it gets to that point, you have massively fucked up your job, all right? And also the exterior ring, because there will then be an exterior cordon, they've also fucked up their job as well. If it gets to the point where someone has gotten to your principal, you have made a huge mistake. And this has happened. This is the classic example was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. If you want details on this, listen to the podcast, a member of our stable, Heroes and Howlers, Mikey Robbins, absolutely brilliant. But essentially, Abraham Lincoln had to hire his own bodyguard. It wasn't provided by the government. And then the guy they got had been fired from the police because he was a drunk.
Great.
And at the time, while he was sitting in Ford's Theatre enjoying the play, his bodyguard at the interval went, I might sneak next door for a cheeky beer, was actually drinking at the bar with John Wilkes Booth. And then John Wilkes Booth went into the theatre and the guy was still in the bar drinking.
Oh,
the bodyguard was in the bar drinking when Booth walked into the box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head twice. So that is a massive, and that actually changed the way Americans do personal security. They now have a department. The Secret Service looks after 2 things, the security of VIPs and forgery.
So what we're seeing now is a surge in activity from extreme right groups. We've seen it recently. We've seen it overseas as well. And a lot of we even hear that there's groups engaging in some kind of training camps in rural areas because, they're preparing for a race or an ideological war. And I think we're seeing that play out. A lot of these groups are hijacking, that we saw them hijack the trade union protest in Melbourne for their own kind of ideological rhetoric. So we're seeing this happen and we're seeing this play out. I would suggest or think that it's not long until something goes awry.
Look, I think it was the Home Affairs Minister, is that Karen Andrews?
Karen Andrews.
She actually stood there and said essentially the risk of a terrorism incident happening in Australia literally has not dropped below plausible since 2014.
Yes, and it's prompted them to, list the base and Hezbollah as terrorist groups now. So, it's illegal for you to be part of them.
Hezbollah has always been a terrorist group, the terrorist side of Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is now also a political movement. So it's very much like the Sinn Féin.
No, but they've made it illegal. They've added to the list of terrorist organisations.
Exactly.
So it's a criminal offence to be a member in Australia.
They've included the political arm of Hezbollah into the terrorist organisation, which is fine because much like the Sinn Féin did with the IRA back during the Troubles, they were funding the IRA. The same way Hezbollah political will be funding Hezbollah terrorism, therefore they're enmeshed with the terrorist organisation, therefore they're a terrorist group.
And with the base, they're kind of like this violent, racist, neo-Nazi organisation. And what I find quite interesting is we're moving away from the ISIS and ISIL and that kind of stuff, more into like this kind of right-wing, neo-Nazi faction, so to speak, that is what we really need to be afraid of right now.
And what's curious about that, as you said, they're hijacking other movements, right?
Yes,
so they've hijacked the anti-vax movement. They hijacked the builders, essentially, in Melbourne for their protest. They've hijacked all of these movements, which is very much what the extreme left used to do. So the international socialists, anarchist groups, interestingly enough, I was just reading an article where it was an international socialist or workers' socialist website were basically saying, the police are really thrilled with these demonstrations because they get to show all their new toys and guns and stuff like that. And it's like, well, they're cops and there is civil unrest, therefore they need to be on the street to do this. Now, I mean, the thing is, this isn't just Australia. It's happening it's
happening everywhere. The UK, the US.
In Rotterdam, they were burning cars, which is very interesting because one of the people that have been arrested has said, we need to start burning police cars to get noticed. It's like, guy, just walking down the street with a noose on a stick got you noticed. You don't need to burn the place down. But, I mean, as the Prime Minister said, there are a lot of people out there that are frustrated. There are also a lot of people out there that are using that frustration as a means to their own ends.
100%.
Right? Because the guy and the husband and wife who are pushing the pram with the baby in it that just, we'd much rather just eat garlic and echinacea and let that be our treatment for COVID. And why can't we just do that? And can we walk down the street? They don't want to be associated with the Molotov cocktail throwing, Beretta 50 cal sniper rifle bearing idiots that are taking over these movements. The other really scary thing about this is there are a lot of low-level politicians that are using this.
They're beefing up their rhetoric to kind of fire up this base, which is kind of similar to what Trump did, hence the whole, January 6th kind of what happened there at the Capitol. Yeah. So they're really, they're playing a dangerous game, I think.
Look, it's really dangerous because, one, as soon as somebody gets hurt, and at the rate it's going, it's really, really likely. That is why Karen Andrews stood there and went, the risk of terrorism in Australia has not dropped since 2014.
Yes. But I think what people need to get their heads around, and I think the average person, they might find this quite difficult, is they have to shift that idea of a terrorist looks like a person of colour or who's Arabic or, belongs to ISIS and wears a hijab and all that. A terrorist is actually probably your neighbour or like someone that you know. And that's what's going to be harder to, I think, get on top of this because white people stick together with other white people.
He was a quiet guy who kept much to himself.
It's
there's a
so
reason he kept to
easy
himself.
to be angry or be afraid of someone who doesn't look like you.
Yeah, essentially, it's the whole idea of the other, right?
Yes, the other. And Australia is built on this whole concept of the other.
Which was, pretty much most nationalist movements or nationalistic pride is built on the other, on your exceptionalism.
We had it with the Japanese. We had it with the Greeks.
We're going back to China.
Yeah.
The Red Menace is coming again, right? Yeah. Right. The other is a really, and interestingly enough, if you look at our fiction, there's been this raft of zombie stuff because it immediately dehumanises the other. They're just these mindless zombies that are coming to kill us, right? So insert that, insert Nazi, insert communist, insert whatever you want, terrorists. They're just mindless people that we don't care about and we're going to destroy. The thing that's really, really telling about all of this with this political opportunism going is essentially what people don't understand is as soon as somebody gets hurt, as soon as some politician's child gets hit by a car because somebody's decided I'm going to drive my car at them as they're crossing the road to go to school, or somebody firebombs somebody's house or somebody, you watch every politician that's been going, you should take your freedoms back. You watch them backpedal like crazy. because they are duplicitous in this occurring.
Yeah, and what's incredibly frightening is people, so these politicians, these low-level politicians who kind of like beef up this rhetoric, they have the most impressions on Facebook. They're the ones that have the most engagement on Facebook.
Exactly.
So they're the ones that are actually spreading this kind of like sowing the seeds of what potentially could be catastrophic.
Yeah, and now the interesting thing about that is everyone says, freedom of expression, I should be able to express myself.
Yeah, you
freedom
should.
of expression is good, but interestingly enough, if somebody turned around and started saying, somebody should take Craig Kelly and, string him up on a fence and hurl acid at him, I'm pretty sure that Craig Kelly would take umbrage to that. Now, this is the thing. It's that whole idea of I'm allowed to threaten because I'm expressing my freedom and my opinion, but you can't express your opinion if it offends me. And I mean, this is the dichotomy we live in. And what people don't understand is how very, very quickly a situation like this can escalate out of control. And the best example of this is what we like to call the lobby restaurant incident. Do you remember it?
Run me through it again.
One Australia Day, when Julia Gillard was Prime Minister, they were having an awards ceremony for volunteers, for people that had been volunteering in the Australian community. They were giving out awards at the Lobby restaurant in Canberra, which is just down next to the old Parliament House and quite close to the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. Now, earlier that morning, Tony Abbott had turned around to the media and said, well, I think it's time we got rid of the tent embassy. It's useless and does nothing anyway. Well, that's quite inflammatory, particularly on Australia Day. Now, the thing is, Tony Abbott was attending the awards ceremony with Julia Gillard, and then one of Julia Gillard's staffers just sent a text message saying to somebody that was attending a protest at the tent embassy that, oh, by the way, Tony Abbott's over here at the Lobby restaurant if you guys are interested. The next thing, the Lobby restaurant is surrounded with people pounding on the windows. Now, of course, Gillard's personal protection team turned around and went, we need to get you out of here now. Now, personally, what I don't understand is because at one point, and there's footage of it, Tony Abbott walked up and said, is there anything I can do? And if I was Julia Gillard, I would have turned around and said, you can go outside and tell those people what you meant. Would he? No, but she at least could have done that. But she did what she was told to do by her protection team, and they left in an absolute freaking debacle. There were police with riot shields. She lost a shoe. I mean,
all I remember from that whole experience was that she lost her shoe.
She lost her shoe, but the thing is, she's got her body man, all right? So her PPO has got his arm over her head tucked into his chest, and he's running her to the car. So I'm sorry, she suffered great embarrassment because of that. And, of course, in the background, there's Tony Abbott also being led out by the protection team, laughing his head off, thinking it's a great joke. This is because and now it went back, interestingly enough, the staffer quit that day. He said, I've made a mistake. It was stupid of me to let this person know, because he let one person know and they let other people know, and then it spiraled out of control. He quit. The AFP investigated it and turned around and said he was a media advisor. He was contacting someone in the media. There was nothing wrong he did. The problem was it escalated out of control once that information passed through the crowd.
Which shows like how quickly like things can escalate. All it takes is just, kind of a tweet or something innocuous, a text, and then all of a sudden it can really get out of hand. And now we've got like the AFP working with local police, now working with ASIO to kind of come up with this plan to go, hang on a minute, this is now getting out of control and we need to work out what we've got to do about it.
I mean, you look at Parliament House now has a fence around it, which annoys me so much because I used to rollerblade down it. How many people can say...
You rollerblading with a bum bag, for sure.
Yeah, I did. Nearly killed myself when I landed in the middle of the United Kingdom High Commission's lawn. Thank God it was freshly sown, or I would have been in really big trouble. But essentially, we used to rollerblade down Parliament House, and it was fun. Now you can't even go up there to look down the skylight into the Senate and House of Representatives chamber. This is because people get out of control and do stupid stuff. Now, the one thing, and this is my big takeaway from this, is do you really want to know how expensive this is? Because... Yeah,
it's going to be really expensive.
It's exceptionally expensive. It's vehicles, it's man hours, it's planning. So for the Prime Minister to visit somewhere, in Australia it's not so bad, but for him to visit overseas, that means you have to send a forward team that investigate everywhere he's going to do a threat assessment on everything that's going on in the country and every location he's going to do, create a plan, create an exit strategy, create escape routes, set up safe houses. It's a huge, huge deal.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the Americans, do you remember, I think it was Mike Pence came to Australia for like 2 days.
Yeah.
They shut down traffic in Sydney so he could get in the Beast, that bloody big car, the limo they have, to drive to Kirribilli and then back to the airport. They shut the city down.
Yeah, I remember that.
Rather than deal with traffic.
That's a very American thing to do, though.
Yeah.
It's like Moses, let's part the sea. Let us through.
When George W. Bush visited Canberra, they had F-18s on station for the entire time he was in the city.
Crazy.
And the other thing was he stayed in the US Embassy, in the ambassador's residence, because that was, to the Americans, the safest spot in the country. Yeah. This is what it takes. It takes a lot of money and a lot of manpower to do this. Now, if you've got idiots walking down the street waving nooses, you're idiots. I'm sorry, you're being stupid. But if you've got people that are saying, by the way, guys, here's how you 3D print an automatic weapon.
It's crazy.
Now you've got some trouble.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see is some escalation and some arrests. I mean, just recently, we had a man in Tamworth in inland New South Wales being arrested for threatening as well, making threats over social media.
Yeah.
So I think more arrests are going to start being made and examples of people are going to have to happen. But I think the real kind of scare for me is the fact that we do have extremist far-right neo-Nazi groups who are actually in training camps in the middle of Australia, and we know that this is going on and they're ready, they're arming themselves for what they think is the next big race war.
Now, funnily enough, training camps out in the bush, that actually isn't an unheard of thing because the Ustashi did it back in the 70s.
Yes, exactly.
Terrorist organisations were doing it in the 80s, 90s. So Middle Eastern terrorist groups were doing it as well.
We've got a big country. There's a lot of places you can hide.
A lot of places you can hide. And, particularly if you go out in Western New South Wales, there's a lot of desert. You're not going to hit anything. Literally, you'd be hard-pressed to hit a kangaroo or a tree. The problem being is we've got a big country and there's a lot of places you can hide these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, most of them stay close to where they can get stuff, which keeps them close. But, the classic was farmers hearing gunshots. It's like, if you hear a guy taking a pot shot at a rabbit, yeah, that's fine. But when you hear automatic weapons fire, someone's going to ring the cops.
Yeah, someone might. And also, you know what? Another saving grace is technically these people aren't usually the brightest.
Well, yeah, usually it's as it stands, the foot soldiers aren't the brightest. You don't want to send your bravest and your best in harm's way.
No.
But my God, the guys that are organising it, they really know what they're doing. And unfortunately, I think they're dealing with a little bit of fire and it's going to come back at them and back at them hard. Because under the ASIO Act, the promotion of communal violence is regarded as a threat to security, and as such, you are in our frame.
And what kind of frame would that be? Like, what are we talking about? Like some serious jail time?
Well, no, for ASIO won't jail you, but ASIO would certainly be looking at these right-wing groups right now. They've already said over 50% of their investigations into terrorism now are directed towards the right wing. That's really, really bad. That's really, really... It used to be 50% of ASIO's targeting budget was towards the Soviet Union. Now it's towards right-wing groups. That's bad.
And this is the thing that I think Australians in particular need to start getting their head around.
Yeah.
That someone who you may live next to, who you think is just your average white person, could actually be a far-right extremist.
Oh, yeah. They're literally, you could be living next door to one right now. I know I'm not, because I don't have anyone living next door to me. They all live above me.